Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf. As you might have noticed if you're following my channel, there hasn't been a books weekly last Sunday. I've been traveling the whole week up until yesterday and I didn't have a proper computer, so I couldn't really film a weekly. And it's too late now anyway because the next books weekly is coming up on next Sunday. So I thought what I'll do is at least I do a reading wrap up of the books that I read for the DiverseAthon week, which was from the 12th to the 19th of September. I read 4 books for the DiverseAthon and I think that's pretty good given, like I said, travel and work and life. So 4 books I want to discuss with you and I want to get right into it. And the first book I've read was Rajia Hassib's In the Language of Miracles. Rajia Hassib is an Egyptian writer. She's born in Alexandria, studied architecture there, and immigrated to the United States when she was 23, I believe. And In the Language of Miracles is her first novel. She's a really interesting person, I think. And I'll link an interview with her, a talk she did after her book was published down below in the description box, as I will, by the way, for all the 4 authors I discussed and the 4 books, because I think it might be interesting to learn a little bit more about the authors. Anyway, back to In the Language of Miracles. The book is set in contemporary America, in a fictional town, Somerset, in New Jersey, and the main characters are an Egyptian American family, parents, the mother of the wife and the children, 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. And one of the sons, that's the main story that the book deals with, one of the sons, the eldest, Hassib, he killed his longtime friend, neighbor's daughter, and then himself. So the book is about the aftermath of that horrific event. And it asks the question of how to deal with something like that. Firstly, as a family, how do you deal with it if your brother or your son committed a crime like that? But more importantly, maybe even the question, how do you deal with it as a family towards the community you live in? The neighbors you've been friends with for years and now your son has killed their daughter. How to apologize for something like that. And in the talk, Hassib said that the way of apologizing, especially because the family is a Muslim family, so that adds an extra layer to it, although the crime was not terrorist related, but still Hassib says in her talk that the way Muslims are often asked to speak out against Muslim terrorism or Muslim crimes, but then when they do, it might be too much because you don't want them in the memorial, for instance, the family of the dead girl in the book, they, after a year, they do a memorial service, and the father of the perpetrator decided that his family had to attend. That causes tensions, and the question, is that a good idea to go there, or should you just restrain yourself and not apologize in that way? So that issue is really dealt with beautifully, and the story is very engaging. The family members and the neighbors, how they all worked out and described. I really enjoyed that book, and I hope Hassib will continue writing, because I would be really interested to read her new books if she decides to continue writing. The second book I've read was The Story Hour by Thrity Umrigar. Umrigar is an Indian author born in Mumbai but living in Cleveland. She's been a journalist for many years and she's written 2 previous best-selling novels, The Space Between Us and The World We Found. The Story Hour is about 2 women. We have Maggie, a 56-year-old psychiatrist, and Lakshmi, a 30-something-year-old Indian woman living in the United States. Lakshmi is trapped in an unhappy marriage and she tried to kill herself, and Maggie is her psychiatrist, her therapist. As the story evolves, the two women become not only patient and therapist, but friends. We learn more about Maggie's marriage to an Indian man. We learn more about the background of Lakshmi's unhappy marriage. And although the story is interesting, I didn't find the book that good in the end. The first-person narrative of Lakshmi in broken English sometimes gets a little irritating, but what bugged me most was the relationship between the two women, because I thought as a psychiatrist, as a therapist, the relationship was very unprofessional. The way Maggie talked about her cases with her husband, the way she didn't really set the boundaries that should be set between a patient and a doctor. And the second thing that bugged me was the way the characters felt a little bit cardboard. This typical unhappy Indian marriage, and the way it is solved all by Lakshmi, who is not very educated but who knows about life and who can make Maggie see what life is about. So it was not my favorite. It was an interesting read, and if you are interested in the topics I just described, you should probably check it out, but it was not my favorite read of the week. And on to the third book, The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. Cisneros was born in Chicago in 1954, but is a Mexican-American writer, lives now in Mexico. And The House on Mango Street was published 1984 for the first time, so it's more than 94 to more than 30 years old. And it's a beautiful book. It's not a novel in the strict sense of the word. It's the story of Esperanza, a Mexican girl living in an impoverished neighborhood in Chicago. And Esperanza's story and the story of her family and the neighbors and friends is told in tiny little vignettes, not even short stories, because sometimes the vignettes are not more than 1 or 2 pages. But the flavor of the life and the beautiful writing by Cisneros really give you an idea of the life, even though those little vignettes are only loosely connected. So if you have never read, like I never did, The House on Mango Street, you should definitely check it out. It's a beautiful book. And the fourth and last book I've read for the DiverseAthon week was The Book of Memory by Petina Gappah. Petina Gappah is a writer in Zimbabwe, contemporary writer. The Book of Memory is her first novel. She wrote short story collections before, and a new short story collection, Rotten Row, is coming out in November of this year. The Book of Memory tells the story of a female main character, Memory. When the book opens, she is imprisoned in Harare on death row. She is accused of having killed Lloyd, a white man whom she had been living with. Why, we don't know exactly in the beginning, from age 9 to age 18. Memory is an albino woman, so this theme of being an outsider in Africa, being quote-unquote white, but not, is a main theme of the book, and we learn the background of Memory's life before she started to live with Lloyd, so with her parents in the township. We learn also bit by bit more about her relationship to Lloyd, why she came to live with him. We learn something about Zimbabwean politics, about life in prison, about the inmates, that Memory is living with in prison, about the prison guards, about Zimbabwean language and mystery. And it's beautifully written, but it was just too much, I thought. The book lacked focus in a way, in my opinion. It was as if there were too many stories struggling to be heard and to be in the foreground, and the story of Memory, which is really very interesting, I thought, not only because she's an albino woman, but also because she was accused of murder and she's on death row. But her story gets a bit lost in the muddle, I thought. But because the writing is so good, I'm certainly want to read more of Gappah's work, and maybe she is more of a short story writer, and her new collection that I already mentioned that will come out in November, I will certainly read, because I think Gappah is an exceptionally good writer, but the novel was just muddled and too much, in my opinion. So those were my 4 DiverseAthon reads last week. Please let me know in the comments whether you read any of the books I've discussed, or what books did you read during the DiverseAthon, if you participated, or any other comments. You know how I like to discuss books with you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye!